Escape Pod. Episode 887. Flashback Friday. The Revolution, brought to you by Nike. By Andrea Phillips. Part 1 of 2.
Hello, and welcome to Escape Pod, your weekly science fiction podcast. I'm Valerie Valdez, your host for this episode. Our story this week is The Revolution, brought to you by Nike, by Andrea Phillips. It will be presented in 2 parts. This is a flashback from our very own archives from September 2018. The story was first published in Fireside Magazine in February 2017. Andrea Phillips is an award-winning immersive experience designer and author. Her projects include high-profile and innovative executions for Sony Pictures, HBO, Amazon Studios, and more. Her original IP immersive projects include the human rights game America 2049, the independent commercial ARG Perplex City, and contributions to iOS fitness games Zombies Run and The Walk. Her projects have variously won the Prix Jeunesse Interactivity Prize, a Broadband Digital Award, a Canadian Screen Award, a BIMA, the Origins Vanguard Innovation Award, and others. Her book, A Creator's Guide to Transmedia Storytelling, is used to teach digital and immersive storytelling at universities around the world. Andrea's original work includes the novels America Incorporated and Revision, the kickstarted serial The Daring Adventures of Captain Lucy Smokeheart and its companion game The Daring Mermaid Expedition, and The McKinnon Account, a short story that unfolds in your email inbox. She has collaborated on Realm serials, including Bookburners and Remade, and served as the showrunner for Control-Alt-Destroy. Her short fiction has been published in Fireside Magazine, Escape Pod, and the Jews vs. Aliens anthology. Our narrator, Julia Rios, is a queer Latinx writer, editor, podcaster, and narrator whose fiction, nonfiction, and poetry have appeared in Latin American Literature Today, Lightspeed, and Goblin Fruit, among other places. Their editing work has won multiple awards, including the Hugo Award. Julia is a co-host of This Is Why We're Like This, a podcast about the movies we watch in childhood that shape our lives, for better or for worse. They've narrated stories for Escape Pod, Podcastle, Pseudopod, and Cast of Wonders. They're OMG Julia on Twitter. Now, get ready for a revolution that will most certainly be televised, because it's story time.
The Revolution, brought to you by Nike, by Andrea Phillips. 1. The Brief. Corazon clicked to the slide she'd been dreading. Long-term trends for brand engagement. It was dire. She focused on the smudgy mirror at the far end of the conference room, looking past her team to her own reflection. She pulled her shoulders back like her grandmother had instructed. She tipped her head to the side, disarming, but not too flirty. When she spoke, she was a breath apologetic, but not too much. As you can see, we have our work cut out for us. She turned to face the projected line graph behind her. Year-on-year sales are down, but we've been expecting that due to the current economic climate. That was the euphemism to end all euphemisms. Everybody in that over-air-conditioned room knew exactly what she meant, though, because they were all living on the same rapidly sinking ocean liner. Gregoria, a junior art director, began to nervously shred the paper cup her morning latte had come in. The really bad part is this. Corazon swept her hand along the line labeled Brand Perception, which had plummeted like a stone in the aftermath of the election. And it's not just us. The truth is, nobody gives a shit about brands right now. There was dead silence around the conference table. Nobody murmured. Nobody shuffled their feet. Nobody made eye contact with anyone else either, each lost in their own private hell of solitude. She let that silence hang, suspended for a full and deeply uncomfortable minute. Her eyes flickered over to her boss, the global creative director. He was a short man with intense eyes, and considering his age, a remarkably luxurious head of white hair. Holiday was 30 years her senior, and had driven the Nike account for longer than she'd been alive, until he'd been forced into a promotion. If he were feeling prickly, he could take this as a personal insult. Unlike everyone else, he gazed fixedly at the line graph, his index fingers steepled over his lips. Like everyone else, he said nothing. "We need to come up with a whole new approach to stay relevant," Corazon continued at last. "The numbers coming in show that nothing we have to say is resonating anymore. We're seen as shallow, corporate, in the bad way." She ended on a strong note, no uptalk, just like her grandmother had been coaching her to do. Holiday quirked an eyebrow upward. "Is there a good way?" It released the tension in the room, and the team chuckled a little too hard. "So, what do young people care about right now? Let's see." Corazon clicked to the final slide. Then she tapped on the bar chart on the screen behind her, point by point. They care about the state of the world. They care about peace and stability and the environment. They care about civil rights, diversity, equality. In short, they care about politics. The assembled account team looked at each other, uncomfortable at hearing this fundamental truth spoken out loud. They cared about politics too. Each one of them was keenly familiar with the same aching feeling of looming disaster and helplessness to avert it. Rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, selling running shoes while Rome burned. Holiday shifted in his seat. "We can be political," he said. "Our brand values are compatible with that." Corazon didn't flinch. This was the part she'd been building up to, the part she'd rehearsed until she woke with the words on her lips. "We can't do it with the same inoffensively aspirational crap we've been doing for years," she said. "Staking out an opinion only after it's safe, and the only people who disagree are people who were never in our demo. That doesn't fly anymore. We have to put some skin in the game. We need to be dangerous." Heads around the table nodded cautiously. Consumers know it when they see bullshit. They're not interested in empty words anymore. They're not interested in garbage awareness campaigns that don't solve anything either. They want action. "So, what does that mean for Nike, hotshot?" Holiday was looking at her in a new way, his chin up, his eyes narrowed. She couldn't tell yet if it was respect or ruffled feathers. Was he going to think she was competing with him and wreck her career? Impossible to say. Nothing to do but steam forward or die trying. She took a deep breath. "I have an idea." Corazon's phone began ringing as soon as she stepped out of the building. Her grandmother must have been watching for her to leave work with "Find My Friends." "Love you, Lola," Corazon answered. Her grandmother's face on the tiny screen was crinkled up with concern. "How did it go?" she asked. "Did it work?" "I don't know yet." Corazon surveyed the crowd of fellow commuters around her, dressed in somber clothes and somber faces. Best not to be too chatty about her plans in such a public venue. "I might have already lost, but I won't know until the creative meeting tomorrow. I can't get my hopes up." "Even if you lose, you haven't lost yet." Her Lola's voice was on fire on the other end of the line. "As long as you breathe, as long as you have a voice to speak, you have power, my corazon. Remember where you came from." 2. The Concept. Holiday's office was all shelves stacked with 40 years of crystal trophies, reference books, toys. His broad windows looked west where the sun was setting over the Hudson River. The walls were orange with playful splashes of white and blue. The furniture was made of all natural materials. It could have blended into a Starbucks or an Apple store. Corazon loathed it. This carefully designed room tried too hard to seem fun and quirky, masquerading itself as a place for leisure. But the mask concealed the cold, mercenary truth that they were all here to do work for money, in order to make someone else even more money. Late capitalism, peak consumer culture, layers of lies and deception. Well, maybe she could make the lie true. Holiday had his feet up on his desk. He turned a small object over and over in his hands and stared at the ceiling. So you're really serious about this? Corazon sat in the chair behind his desk. The rest of the Key Creative team was squeezed into a pair of sofas at the far end of the room, wide-eyed and entirely silent. Deadly serious, she said. You want us to save the world. His tone dripped disbelief, but not yet outright contempt. She hadn't lost yet. She still had a chance. Corazon caught his eyes and held her chin level. Don't you? Back when Corazon was in college, her friends had always joked about the dystopian future lying ahead of them. They'd never quite believed in it at the time. It was just a more grown-up version of saying Bloody Mary into the bathroom mirror with the lights out. Mostly, they'd enjoyed the zing of moral superiority over those not as cynical about the iron fist of the corporate masters who would soon rule the world, or perhaps already secretly did. Since Corazon had joined the ranks of those very corporate masters, she'd had a lot of time to reflect on a fact that her younger self had never quite realized. Corporations are made of people. Thousands of people. And they all had to live in the same world as everybody else. Maybe they could use that power not to rule the world, but to improve it. Holiday stood and began pacing a neat circuit of the room. Let's say I think this is worth thinking about. This isn't going to be easy to sell into the client. Easy isn't going to save the brand, she said. She flexed her fingers where they rested in her lap. Drastic measures are needed. Holiday tossed his toy from one hand to another. Right now we're only spitballing, he warned. What about a brand partnership? What? To dilute the perception of risk, he said, a bit impatiently. He stopped in front of his shelf of awards and contemplated them. We can go in bigger and bolder if it's a joint effort and not just Nike. Corazon turned to the rest of the team. Ideas, anyone? Crickets, at first. They elbowed one another, daring anyone else to speak up. Gregoria scratched at an elbow, thoughtfully. My cousin is on the Heineken account, she said. I'll have a chat with her off the record. I have some friends who went in-house at Coca-Cola, chimed Hussein, their producer. I'll take them to lunch to feel them out. Bubba, the creative technologist, shifted awkwardly. I have a hookup at Google. Corazon had trouble reining in her smile, even if overenthusiasm would undermine her authority on the team. Get NDAs and start those conversations. Get a read on the mood. We'll need some star power, too, Holiday said from the window. He rested his fingers on the horizon. I want a list on my desk of 20 A-list names who we think could be interested. I want Beyoncé. I want Kate McKinnon. I want George Takei. Corazon nodded firmly. Consider it done. We're just spitballing, Holiday warned again. Don't get your hopes up. I won't, Corazon promised. She didn't mean it, but some things are worth getting your heart broken. The white man following Corazon to the subway that night could have been a regular businessman. Corazon wasn't sure at first why she thought otherwise. Maybe it was the mirrored sunglasses, which she didn't think she'd seen in the wild since she was 15, much less after dark. Maybe it was the way he walked, like he didn't have anywhere in particular to be. There was nobody heading toward the train at 8 p.m. that didn't have somewhere else to get to, and fast. Corazon quickened her stride to try to lose him, regretting that the soup place on her way was already closed for the night. Otherwise, she'd stop in to avoid the creeper and pick up dinner in one elegant stroke. But the man had longer legs than her, and hurry as she might, she couldn't increase the distance between them without outright running. If anything, he closed the gap. There wasn't anyone else out walking. A car flashed by, a cab, but not empty, so Corazon couldn't try to flag it down. She'd briefly thought about heading back to the office to take the company car service instead, but that would mean having to walk past him. She hurried onward. The subway station at least was never empty. The stranger finally caught up to her in the stairwell down to the station. He grabbed her arm and pushed her into the handrail. "You think you're so smart," he breathed into her ear. "But you better watch what you're doing. Shut your mouth and keep your nose clean, and maybe you won't get deported." Corazon opened her mouth and screamed as loud as she could, just like she practiced in her self-defense classes. The man let go of her arm, startled. She screamed again, so loud it rasped her throat raw. Footsteps echoed toward them. The man fled back toward the street. A transit worker hurried up to her, a little out of breath. A large man in every sense, 3 weeks past needing a haircut. "You okay, lady?" He puffed. He pressed a flat hand to his chest over his fluorescent safety vest as he caught his breath. "Someone bothering you?" "He's gone now," Corazon said. She clutched the rail to keep herself from sagging. She couldn't guess if the man somehow knew what she was proposing in the office. Was he one of the administration's rumored thugs, somehow already privy to her plans? Or just a drive-by bigot trying to make her feel small in her own damn country? Hers as much as anyone's. She owned that right. Either way, she wasn't going to give him what he wanted. "Thank you for being here," she told the transit worker. "I owe you one." "All in a day's work," he told her. He hovered nearby, his hands hanging awkwardly midair like a stuck car on a roller coaster. "You need anything else?" "I'll be fine now." Corazon dodged around him and down the steps toward her train. "Don't worry," she called back to him. "I've got everything under control." The rounds of spitballing didn't go as smoothly as Corazon might have hoped. For one thing, a holiday sat them out entirely. "Come to me when you have a program. I don't want to hear a squeak about it until it's ready." That left Corazon in charge of a team that didn't know if they should be taking her lead and running with it as fast as they could, or staging a mutiny to save their own careers. They veered from one extreme to the other. Bubba adjusted his red-framed glasses. "I don't know if this can work, no matter what we do," he said, even more slowly than his usual easy twang. "This is just cray-cray. Who's going to show up to any of this? Who would even stick their necks out, given—" Corazon's mind drifted back to the man in the subway stairwell. But she didn't try to argue. It wasn't a point that needed arguing. Her grandmother would insist that she was losing ground by even conceding that a discussion could exist. But not all of her team felt the same way. "That's exactly the attitude we need to fight," Gregoria said. She glared at Bubba, though the harrowing effect was dampened by the anime makeup she'd adopted last year. "Nike has always been about encouraging people to push out of their comfort zone. This is just another facet of the same thing." Bubba opened his mouth with a belligerent look in his eye. Time for Corazon to short-circuit that argument before it worked up too much momentum. You're right that we can't just start with protests and expect anyone to show up, she said. We need to get people fired up first. We'll need to promote the promotion. Hussein took it back to the practical level, bless his deeply nerdy heart. So you're thinking, what, an all-integrated media campaign? Social, TV, billboards? All of that and more. But first we'll need to develop a manifesto, she said. And I think we should curate one instead of creating one. Gregoria tapped her pen to her exquisitely outlined lips. Think about those walls of Post-its after the election. If you collect enough tidbits from enough people, it's beautiful. It's art. She had a dreamy look on her face, something private and sweet. Corazon wondered for the first time what kind of art Gregoria made in her free time. She was tight-lipped about her personal life. What? Are you talking about user-generated content? That's always such a crapshoot. Bubba scratched his beard. Remember that promotion last April that was taken down by 4chan? There's a lot more writing on this, so 4chan's going to be a lot more interested. We can make it work, Corazon said. Who the hell is going to moderate that? Are you going to? I didn't say it was going to be easy. Corazon took to the whiteboard and began sketching out how different elements of the campaign would come together. But there are steps we can take since we know we'll be a target. The campaign flow emerged through dozens of quick strokes of a blue dry erase marker. The thing I don't get, Hussein said at last, is what the hell does any of this have to do with selling shoes? Gregoria rolled her eyes. We don't need them to like the shoes, Bubba said. We just need them to like the brand, and then they'll feel good about buying whatever shit we're selling. Corazon stepped back from the whiteboard and admired her work. This is how I see it working, but obviously it needs a lot of fleshing out before it's ready to pitch. Let's get started. It was 6 weeks before Corazon felt confident enough to present the pitch to Holiday. 6 weeks of mood boards, shifting keynote slides, endless tweaking of the same 2 sentences. 6 weeks in which the president announced he would call India's Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, Dave, because it was easier to remember. There were almost hourly revelations about conflicts of interest, and fresh allegations of corruption somehow never got investigated, much less prosecuted. China circled Taiwan with a protective cordon of battleships. Under it all, Corazon was keenly aware of the line she was walking. Provocative, yes. Inspiring, yes. But her grand ambition was just subtext. She needed to maintain a careful veneer of plausible deniability. Finally, the team pinned Holiday down for a 6 p.m. meeting to show them what they'd accomplished. If Holiday gave a thumbs up, they'd get a green light to bring it to the client. He watched them click through the presentation with a dispassion that could be taken for boredom. He stopped them just once. Where did you get these numbers? He asked. Corazon cleared her throat, then immediately regretted the show of nerves. They're projected from protest movements like Occupy Wall Street and the Women's March. When Corazon reached the final slide, thanks and contact information, Holiday flicked his fingertips at the team. Give us a minute, he said. They knew a dismissal when they heard one and shuffled out obediently. Corazon practiced her invisible calming techniques. Slow breath, shoulders relaxed. Holiday stood and paced. You know this is... He didn't say impossible. I know, she said. There was a hitch in her voice. Unacceptable. Slow breath, shoulders relaxed. He steepled his fingers under his nose. I won't be able to sell it in, guaranteed. She wilted inside, but kept her face calm. You think not? No. But maybe you can. He thumped her on a shoulder blade, and then went back to his seat. We'll talk about this with the client and see where it goes. Right now it's only talking. His eyes blazed a warning. But you'll do the pitch, Corazon. You're on your own. Corazon knew a dismissal when she heard one, too. She didn't skip out, not exactly, but she did spend the next 10 minutes in a bathroom stall, silently squealing into her knuckles. She still hadn't lost. Corazon FaceTimed her grandmother herself when she got home that night, curled up on the sofa with her grandmother's face cradled in both her hands. "They're going to let me pitch it, Lola," she said, breathless. "I knew you could do it." Her grandmother glowed with all the same joy Corazon had worked to suppress in the office. Corazon bit her lip. "Tell me again about people power." Her grandmother's creased face collapsed into the origami configuration of long-cherished pride. "Our finest hour," she said. "What was it like?" "It was frightening," her grandmother said. "It was wild and terrible, and we didn't know if we were all going to die or if we could somehow change everything, but we couldn't suffer anymore. We couldn't not do it." Three. The pitch. The Nike conference room was heavy on aluminum. The lights were too bright, the casters on the chairs were too loud, and everything echoed a little too much. There was no messy conference speakerphone in here, no exposed cables. The table was bare save for elegant glasses of water nobody was drinking, and pitchers beaded with sweat. Corazon had initially pitched the concept to only the Nike marketing team, but she was fast-tracked to a meeting with the executive suite, the brand president, the CEO, the general counsel. They were all decades older than Corazon, and they all seemed vastly annoyed to be there. Corazon swallowed hard. It wasn't normal that she'd even meet these executives at all. Typically, she'd only have to present to those internal marketing people once, and they would in turn bring her ideas to their bosses. She wasn't ready. Too late to turn back now. So far, she'd set up the pitch only in broad tactical terms. She described massive in-person activations and viral, celebrity-led branded content. She'd tried to set up the sweeping goal of Nike becoming the voice for a generation. She had to prime them first, and then she'd light the powder and see if it burned or not. But now she'd reached that moment of truth. She clicked forward to Gregoria's stroke of genius. The Nike swoosh tripled to echo the 3 arrows of the anti-fascist circle. "It's time for Nike to fight fascism in America," she said. The room erupted into furious cross-chatter. She waited for it to die down. "Here's the core problem we need to solve," Corazon said. "The current administration is bad for Nike, not just for short-term brand image, but for long-term sales. Growing income inequality means a larger share of the population will have less and less disposable income. Political and economic instability means what money people have they're going to save. And the foreign policies in play mean global sales for American brands are going to dry up like the face of Mars. It's already started." Holiday sat next to her, silent. She looked at him for support. He averted his eyes. If her ship went down, he wasn't going with it. She clicked through a few elegantly designed slides explaining this looming disaster. This is only going to get worse if nobody does something about it. The CEO leaned back and folded his arms. "So you want us to do something about it?" Corazon didn't smile this time. She looked straight at him, flat and challenging. "Can you trust anyone else to do it for you?" "Is this even legal?" The man next to the CEO scowled. Corazon tried to remember who was who from the brief round of introductions before the meeting. He was the EVP of something. "This is treason, isn't it?" The client's general counsel wet her lips. "No, actually. Freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, we still have that. For now, Corazon said. The EVP's eyebrows went up. The investors will have our heads, he said. Do you think that our investors support this mess we've fallen into? That was the brand president who had spoken up. Corazon had made notes at the beginning, but she didn't dare check them now. They don't. We have numbers on it, said another EVP. Investor relations, Corazon remembered. She only nodded thanks, but in her heart she sang that EVP 1,000 songs of praise. What happens if the administration comes after us? That was the council again. They won't play this clean. Corazon shrugged. You've seen your own sales trends, she said. If we don't do something, we're going down whether they come after us or not. What do you have to lose? The CEO rolled back a few inches, his hands folded over his belly. What KPIs would you set for something like this? KPI, the key performance indicator, the promise made from the agency to the client about exactly how well a program would work, how you both knew if you'd succeeded. This was it. Corazon smiled the bold, confident smile she'd practiced in the mirror for 10 minutes every morning for the last 8 weeks, and for the first time said the words that had appeared on not a single slide or brief, that had been uttered in no meetings, that had even so underpinned every word and every image. Regime change, she said. The CEO brought his fist down on the conference table like a gavel. The beautiful glasses of water shivered. Do it. How fast did it happen? Corazon asked her grandmother later. She lay on her bed staring at the cobweb in the corner above her, drifting aimlessly in the still air. The pressure was building up for a long time. It took years for people to get more angry than they were afraid. Some say the revolution took about 3 years from the time Nino Aquino was shot until Marcos ran away with his stolen billions of pesos. But when the right moment finally came, when the people woke up, it all happened in only a few weeks. Marcos stole the election, and then he was fleeing the country in only a few weeks. So we need to make sure that people get more angry than afraid very fast. Very fast. Corazon wiggled her toes thoughtfully. What do you think finally tipped the balance? We won with the truth, Corazon. We won by taking over TV and radio stations and broadcasting the truth. But mostly, we won by making the people know they were not alone. Four. Production. The kickoff meeting was, well, it was something. Holiday wasn't there. He was busy putting out fires on an automotive account over a disastrous consumer test. But there were a slew of new faces on board to implement Corazon's ambitious strategy. There was the social media director, the media planner, the account supervisor, a whole team of art directors and junior copywriters, and event producers and brand strategists and UX people, and... Corazon took a deep breath. It was the most crowded room she'd ever been in charge of. The memory of her grandmother's voice soothed her. It's their job to do what you tell them, she'd said. They have to listen, and they have to be nice. She laid out the overall strategy and timeline as quickly as she could. Eyes grew wide, hands grew restless. Is this past legal? Asked one of the associate media buyers. Corazon turned steely. She made direct eye contact with the junior buyer, held it a little longer than she wanted to. There was no place on the team for dissent or for doubters. All we're doing is giving the audience a platform for their concerns, Corazon said. And the project is already greenlit by the client. We have an opportunity here to do some amazing work. Let's give this everything we've got. Nike as a brand had always been about striving. Not invariably so. The Mars Blackmon ads, were mostly just funny, and so is the Lil Penny campaign. And sometimes they were more about the win than the process. But at its best and most influential, Nike had made itself a symbol of improving yourself and making an impact on the world. Doing better. Being better. They'd even dabbled directly in politics before with an extensive campaign promoting Title IX. Little girls talking about the benefits of sports. It was beautiful, if not controversial. And it had helped to sway the hearts and minds as beautifully produced media often did. Corazon didn't see how this would be any different. Her goal was no different. She wanted people to achieve greatness in their own way, to express themselves, to strive. All she needed to do was paint in the big picture. It wasn't about muscles or body fat. It wasn't about health. It was about living, about achieving greatness. It was about overcoming obstacles, and wasn't that the core value Nike promoted? She wasn't sure the whole team was sold on the idea, but it didn't really matter that much. In the end, all they had to do was follow her lead, and she'd steer the ship. This was what she was born to do. And yet, a thought struck her as she closed out the meeting. Remember, all of you have signed NDAs with the agency and with the client. Honor them. I don't want word of this to get out. Not just off social. Not on subways, not to your friends, not to your mom. The news that night was full of the usual horrifying mix of bluster, misinformation, and doomsaying. Corazon clicked from stream to stream, determined to get a reading on the pulse of public sentiment. But public sentiment was too varied, too wide, too much. In Washington state, thanks to funding cuts, a poorly maintained section of Snoqualmie Pass had been destroyed by flash floods, cutting the I-90 artery and creating a major shipping crisis. Click. The Canadian Prime Minister had ended all pretense of amicability and given a landmark speech threatening to dismiss its American ambassadors and completely sever diplomatic ties with the United States. Click. There was a salmonella epidemic sweeping through the Plains states, but leaks from the CDC and FDA indicated that the agencies were too short-handed to look into the situation, much less to solve it. Click. There were rumors, impossible to believe but impossible not to, of a pending executive order to ban the sale of skirts longer than 30 inches. Click. Congress was mulling an infrastructure tax of 30% of sales price per year on all electric vehicles on the grounds that such car owners weren't paying taxes on gasoline. Click. 15 sixth graders had been killed in an industrial accident at a sugar refinery in Louisiana, the combined result of the Department of Education's new Early Start Job Training Initiative and the defunding of OSHA. Finally, she slid her tablet onto the floor and lay in the dark. Too much. A new catastrophe in every moment. It was too late at night to call her grandmother, so she texted instead. I'm really scared. The reply was already waiting for Corazon when she woke up. That means you're doing something important. Praying hands emoji, angel emoji, flame emoji. The push to bring in brand partners went very poorly. Google wasn't in, and neither were Facebook or Apple. They sent back terse messages wishing Nike luck in its endeavors and declining the opportunity to move ahead. Coca-Cola, Starbucks, and Disney were more enthusiastic. At first. Surprisingly, Starbucks bowed out before the rest. Their brand was pretty progressive. That latte-sipping liberal epithet hadn't come from nowhere. But they weren't ready for a gamble as big as that. Not yet. Not while they still hoped they could make a deal with the volcano and not get burned. Talks with Disney got a little further until the higher-ups caught wind of what the marketing team was up to. Disney was a media company, after all, and the media were having a blockbuster time lately.
Coca-Cola never said no, but after 4 weeks of back and forth, Corazon tried to nail them down for a meeting and their contact just stopped calling back and answering emails. Her assistant took endless messages and made endless chipper apologies. Corazon fumed. At least the others had said no. Sinvergüenza. Finally, she sent an email to the account manager asking her to pass on the bad news that it looked like Nike was going to be in this alone. She scowled at her computer screen, anticipating the fallout. Moments later, Hussein came to her desk with a grin on his face like he'd hit the Powerball and already had the bunker on his new private island stocked up to weather the next 200 years. "I have something that makes up for Coke flaking on us," he said. Corazon sighed. "What's that?" "Beyoncé is in," he said. The impossible grin got wider. "And apparently, she got talking with some of her friends and colleagues. We've been fielding phone calls all morning from CAA, ICM, William Morris. Anyone who's anyone wants to be part of this." Corazon stared at him. "Holy shit." "True story, brah," Hussein said. He rapped on her desk twice. "A lot of people want to see a lot of change. It's happening." The final days of planning were filled with budgets and plans, contracts and final proofs. During the home stretch, Corazon presented to Holiday twice a week, detailing the progress she'd made and the roadblocks they'd encountered. On the 5th such meeting, Holiday sat her down with a sober look and closed his office door. "What's wrong?" she asked. Holiday steepled his fingers under his nose, stared at the gray and sluggish river. "We got a call from the Department of Justice. They said they're concerned about what we're up to, and if we don't get our act together, we might be brought in for treason." Corazon's heart pounded in her chest. Of course word had gotten out. Of course it had. Too many people knew the secret. "What have we told them?" "The agency's lawyers laughed in their faces, and we've got a press release about it going out as soon as possible. We're going to get so much earned media, it's going to be brilliant. You're doing a good job, Corazon. Keep it up." Her heart swelled. According to agency gossip, Holiday had made every single copywriter and creative director under him cry at some point by telling them they'd turned in shit. Usually he was right, but in the pressure cooker of tight deadlines and warring visions, any lack of tiny courtesies could become a painful razor to the soul. But the flip side of this meant that when he said a kind word, it counted tenfold. He was blowing sunshine up nobody's ass. "Thank you," she said. That means a lot from you." "Oh, and one more thing," Holiday said. "We're pushing the launch up to go along with the press release so we can leverage this. Don't fuck it up."
Once again, that was part 1 of The Revolution, brought to you by Nike, by Andrea Phillips. Part 2 will conclude the story next week. Even in a short span of time, parts of the world can change so much that a near-future story feels untethered from reality, like a single balloon escaping from a bundle to drift further and further into an empty sky. Not so much with this story. While it lacks references to, for example, the pandemic and all it's entailed, a difficult thing to predict with any accuracy, many small events and details here still ring true, and the core conceit of using the machinery of capitalism to incite revolution remains a compelling one. Audre Lorde said, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. They may allow us to temporarily beat him at his own game, but they will never enable us to bring about genuine change." I think this story doesn't attempt to refute that statement. Instead, it gives us one possible blueprint for how we might begin a revolution with those tools, even if they are ultimately set aside in favor of better ways to continue the difficult work of building a just future. Escape Pod is part of the Escape Artists Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit and this episode is distributed under the Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Don't change it, don't sell it. Please do share it. If you'd like to support Escape Pod, please rate or review us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite app. We are 100% audience supported, and we count on your donations to keep the lights on and the servers humming. You can now donate via 4 different platforms. On Patreon and Ko-fi, search for Escape Artists. On Twitch, we're at EA Podcasts. You can also use PayPal through our website, escapepod.org. Patreon subscribers have access to exclusive merchandise and can be automatically added to our Discord, where they can chat with other fans as well as our staff members. Our opening and closing music is by Daikaiju at daikaiju.org. And our closing quotation this week is from Audre Lorde, who said, "You become strong by doing the things you need to be strong for." Thanks for joining us, and may your escape pod be fully stocked with stories.